In the dim light of a barely there corridor, a 12-year-old boy stood face to face with an alien soldier. The creature's towering form cast a shadow that stretched across the narrow walls of the space, armor glinting dully in the faint light that filtered through from behind. Two other soldiers flanked him, standing motionless, their faces an unreadable maze of ridged features. The air was thick with tension, yet the boy, unflinching, held his ground. Ren's small hand stretched out in front of him, almost as if compelled by some force greater than his understanding. He offered a simple meal, carefully wrapped in his palm, a silent gesture that would spark a chain of events far beyond the boy's wildest imaginings, or even the small colony where he lived. What began as an act of quiet courage would alter the fate of not just his life, but the destiny of entire fleets. Oswin was a forgotten speck on the far edges of the galaxy, a small human colony that existed without fanfare, on a planet half swallowed by thick forests and mist-laden rivers. The inhabitants were mostly farmers, traders, and explorers who scraped by on the fringes of galactic civilization. Among them was Ren, a 12-year-old with an insatiable curiosity for the unknown, and a penchant for getting into situations others would avoid at all costs. Ren's mother, Mari, raised him alone on the edge of their homestead. She was practical, the kind of woman whose hands were calloused from labor, whose brow furrowed with worry when it came to her son. Unlike the other children, Ren's bravery wasn't just a product of youthful boldness, it was an unshakable defiance of fear itself. One evening, while scavenging near the old supply road, Ren's sharp eyes caught an unusual sight. The usually star-filled sky had darkened, streaked with flashes of blue and silver. From his mother's tales of galactic wars, Ren knew what this meant: ships. The kind that came with soldiers. His heart raced with excitement, overriding the caution that tugged at his mind. He crept through the tall grass, drawn by the pull of the unknown, until he reached a valley where the strange flashes had stopped. Hovering above, like metallic birds of prey, were ships, sleek, angular, with black exteriors that absorbed the light rather than reflecting it. As Ren got closer, he heard something resembling voices, low, guttural, alien. His breath caught. These weren't human soldiers. He knew them from his mother's stories, the Kethari, a species notorious for their ruthless efficiency in battle. They were known across the galaxy as warriors, whose allegiance to their empire was unwavering. His first instinct was to retreat, but as his foot snagged on a stone and sent him tumbling to the ground, everything changed. Silence fell and Ren felt eyes upon him. Two alien soldiers, their glowing eyes scanning him, locked onto his form. Fear clenched his gut, but then an audacity he didn't fully understand surged within him. He glanced at the small bundle of food he'd packed for his adventure, then held it out toward the soldiers. The larger one stepped forward, towering over Ren. Its armor gleamed faintly, a complex web of metal and wiring that resembled veins beneath its skin. Ren's heart raced, but he didn't flinch. He simply offered the food. "I don't have much, but you can have it," Ren said, his voice surprisingly steady despite the chaos in his chest. The larger soldier paused, studying the boy and the simple offering. The second soldier muttered something in their guttural language, but the first raised a hand, silencing it. Slowly, almost reverently, the soldier reached out, its metal-clad fingers curling around the meal. Bread, dried meat, and a small piece of fruit. The soldier looked down at Ren, then slightly inclined its head, an alien gesture that, to Ren's surprise, felt like gratitude. The soldier took the food and the brief encounter passed into memory. But little did Ren know that his simple act of kindness had sparked something far greater than a moment of empathy. A ripple had begun, one that would be felt across the galaxy. The next morning, Ren was woken by his mother's frantic voice calling his name. Stumbling out of bed, he rubbed the sleep from his eyes and stepped out onto the porch. There he froze. Hovering above their small house was a fleet, 2 fleets in fact. Ships of all sizes filled the air, their sleek black exteriors gleaming in the first light of dawn. They weren't human ships. They were the same angular vessels Ren had seen the night before. Mari grabbed Ren's arm, her voice trembling with fear. "What did you do, Ren?" she whispered, her gaze locked on the sky. "I only gave them some food," Ren answered quietly, his heart in his throat. Before Mari could protest, a hum filled the air, and a small craft descended from the fleet. The door opened, revealing the same alien soldier from the previous night, flanked by several others. Their dark eyes scanned the surroundings before focusing on Ren. Mari stepped forward protectively, her voice steady but laced with fear. "What do you want with him?" The soldier regarded her for a long moment, then turned to Ren. His voice, though deep and rumbling with an accent, was clear. "We come to show honor. To repay a debt." Ren blinked in confusion. A debt? He hadn't expected anything in return. He had only offered food, a simple gesture for strangers in need. The alien soldier continued, "Your kind values courage. Your act was unselfish. In our culture, such actions must be recognized." Ren glanced at his mother, whose face was a mix of fear and disbelief. "I didn't do it for anything in return," he said softly, his voice unwavering. "I just thought you might be hungry." The soldier tilted his head, considering Ren's words. "Your world does not think as ours does. You are rare." He paused, and Ren felt the shift in the air as the other soldiers murmured among themselves in their guttural language. "Our leaders," the soldier continued, "wish to honor you. Your act has significance." Ren's heart raced. He had never thought that such a small gesture could carry so much weight. As he looked up at the massive fleet hovering above, he began to understand. In their world, acts of kindness were rare, and respect was something few ever earned. His simple offering had made him someone worth honoring. The lead soldier took a deliberate step forward, his armor gleaming in the sunlight. "Honoring an ally is sacred in Kethari custom. Your son's actions hold meaning to us. To walk away without proper repayment would dishonor him. And us?" Mari's brow furrowed, her grip tightening on Ren's shoulder. "What kind of honor requires an entire fleet?" she asked, defiance creeping into her voice. The soldier glanced at Ren, then back at Mari. "Among our kind, few would offer anything to an outsider. Kindness is rare. For us, such actions are not just remembered, they are recorded. Memorialized." Ren's heart pounded. He hadn't expected any of this. The idea of leaving his small farm even for a moment, to board an alien ship was both thrilling and terrifying. But Mari's reaction was swift and resolute. "Absolutely not," she said, her voice cutting through the morning air. "He's a child. He's staying here." The lead soldier raised a hand, silencing the younger one who had stepped forward with eager enthusiasm. "The invitation stands," he said, his voice soft but firm. "But it is not a demand. We will respect your wishes for now." Ren's mind spun. The idea of traveling to another world was too incredible to ignore, but his mother's protectiveness held him close. He glanced at the younger soldier, whose eyes seemed to hold a glimmer of understanding. It was an invitation, not a command. But whether or not Ren would take it, would change the course of his life and the destiny of countless worlds. Ren lay in bed that night, his mind racing. The sound of his mother's steady breathing filled the room, a comforting contrast to the chaotic swirl of thoughts in his head. How could something so small, a simple offering of bread and dried meat, turn into something so monumental? He couldn't stop thinking about the fleet hovering above their home, the Kethari soldiers who had come to pay him honor, and the invitation to board their ships to see their world. His hands were still slightly trembling, and the adrenaline hadn't fully worn off. The young soldier's eyes, the way they had shone with excitement when he spoke, kept replaying in Ren's mind. What would it be like to leave Earth? To see the stars from a Kethari ship? Ren turned over in bed, staring out the window. The stars glittered beyond the misty hills, distant and cold. They had always seemed so unreachable, like the stories his mother would tell him at night. The stories of grand adventures, of heroes and villains, of galaxies far beyond their tiny corner of the universe. But now those stars didn't seem so distant anymore. The next morning, the hum of the ships above still vibrated in the air. The two Kethari fleets hadn't moved. They were waiting. Ren's heart skipped as he heard a knock on the door. "Ren?" Mari called, her voice tight. "You awake?" Ren rolled out of bed and walked to the door, opening it just enough to peek out. His mother stood in the hallway, her eyes dark with worry. "You've got to understand, Ren," she said, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to stay calm. "I can't let you go with them. They're aliens, Ren. They're not like us. They don't think like us." Ren felt the weight of her words. She was scared. And yet, something inside him rebelled against her fear. He didn't understand it fully, but he felt an undeniable pull toward the unknown. "I'm not asking to go with them forever," Ren said, his voice softer than he intended. Just for a little while. To see what it's like. To understand them. To see how they live." Mari sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I don't understand you, Ren. Why do you have to be like this?" Her voice cracked, but she quickly regained her composure. "You're my son, and I've lost so much already. I can't lose you too." Ren's throat tightened. He knew she was right. She had already lost so much. His father had never come back from one of the early missions to the outer colonies, and every day she had to carry the weight of raising a son alone. Ren wasn't blind to the burden she carried, But he also knew he couldn't let this chance slip away. "Please, Mom," Ren whispered, stepping forward and taking her hand. "I promise I'll come back. I just need to know." Mari's eyes searched his face for a moment, then softened. "You're growing up faster than I can keep up with," she murmured. "But this is too much." The sound of a door sliding open interrupted them. "We are ready," came the low, resonant voice of the Kethari soldier, the one who had accepted Ren's food. He stood just outside the door, flanked by two others. Their presence, silent and imposing, filled the space. Ren turned to face him, feeling both excitement and fear settle in his stomach like a weight. Mari stepped between them, her voice quiet but firm. "If he goes with you, you'll bring him back. Say, no harm. Understand?" The soldier's gaze met hers, his expression unreadable. "Your son's actions are honored by our leaders," he said, his voice carrying a gravity that Ren hadn't heard before. "We do not take such gestures lightly. He will return." Ren's heart raced, but he nodded. He understood that this wasn't just about his curiosity anymore. His small act of kindness had opened a door to an unknown world with consequences far greater than he could imagine. Mari hesitated for one last moment, then with a long breath stepped aside. She couldn't hold him back any longer. With a final glance at her, Ren stepped into the cool morning air, the weight of his decision settling in. The soldiers moved aside as he walked toward the small craft that would take him to the larger ships. As he climbed aboard, he stole one last glance at his mother. She stood at the door, her hands tightly clasped in front of her, watching him leave. There were no words, no final plea to stay. Just a silent goodbye. Ren swallowed hard as the hatch closed, sealing him inside the craft. The ship began to rise, slowly at first, then faster, until the ground below was nothing more than a blur of green and brown. He gazed out the small viewport, watching as the distant hills and the farmhouse shrank into the distance. His heart pounded with a mixture of excitement and fear. What was waiting for him? The craft shuddered slightly, and then, like a thunderstorm, the full force of the fleet's power rippled through the ship. They ascended into the sky, passing through clouds and mist, into the vast emptiness of space. As the planet below disappeared from view, Ren's gaze shifted to the stars. They were closer now, more real than ever before. "This way," the Kethari soldier said, his deep voice breaking the silence. Ren nodded, not sure what to expect, but ready for whatever came next. He had made the choice. Now he had to see it through. And though the stars seemed to beckon him, it was the silence that filled the void that caught his attention. The unspoken promise that this was just the beginning of something far bigger than himself. Something that would echo through the galaxy and beyond. The Kethari ships were a world unto themselves. Long corridors stretched like veins through the sleek ships, the walls lined with flickering holograms and alien symbols. Ren was led through a series of chambers, each one filled with Kethari soldiers who eyed him with silent curiosity. They seemed to be watching him, studying him, as if trying to understand what it was about this young human child that had earned their respect. Finally they arrived at a large chamber, the walls bathed in soft blue light. At the far end of the room stood a raised platform where a group of Kethari leaders were gathered. Their faces, etched with lines of experience, held the same unreadable expressions, but their eyes were focused on Ren with an intensity that sent a chill down his spine. The lead soldier who had accompanied him stepped forward, bowing his head in respect. "We bring the boy," he announced, his voice deep and resonant. "He has done what few others would dare, a simple act of kindness. And yet it has shaken our understanding." Ren swallowed hard. The council's eyes were fixed on him, and he suddenly felt very small. But beneath the pressure, something inside him pushed him forward, a surge of bravery he didn't fully understand. The council's leader, a tall and regal figure, spoke in a language Ren couldn't understand, but the soldier who had guided him translated. "The child has bridged a gap between our cultures," the leader said, his voice ancient and commanding. "Perhaps the time has come to rewrite our codes. To show that honor, true honor, can be found in the smallest of gestures." Ren could only stare. The weight of their words was almost too much to bear, but he stood tall, his gaze unwavering. He hadn't realized it when he'd given them food, but now he understood. His small act had sparked a change that would resonate throughout the galaxy. Ren stood in the center of the council chamber, the air thick with the intensity of the Kethari leader's gaze. The room was vast and dimly lit, its walls adorned with symbols and holograms that flickered with an otherworldly glow. It felt like the heartbeat of the fleet itself. He swallowed hard, trying to steady his nerves, but his hands trembled. It was one thing to stand before his mother when he had done something wrong or unusual, But this was different. These beings, tall, imposing and covered in intricate armor, held the weight of entire worlds in their eyes. They had come here because of him. The leader of the council, a towering figure whose armor seemed to absorb the dim light, stepped forward. His face was angular, his features severe, and his eyes. Ren couldn't quite describe them. They were old, wise, yet somehow still filled with the sharpness of a predator. "Human child," the leader spoke, his voice deep and resonant, the words carrying a weight that seemed to vibrate through Ren's very bones. "We have seen many things in our time, but few acts of kindness have been so significant to our people." Ren couldn't speak at first. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times but never like this. He was standing before the council of the Kethari, the most feared warriors in the galaxy. His small act of giving food to one soldier had somehow become a symbol, an offering that had rippled across the stars. The leader continued, his gaze unwavering. "Your people, humans, are known across the galaxy for your resilience. But this act, simple yet profound, has proven something even more important. You have shown courage, but not the courage of battle. You have shown the courage of mercy. In a time when kindness has all but vanished from the cosmos, your offering stands as a reminder that even the smallest gestures can alter the course of history." Ren stood taller, though his heart was pounding. His mind flashed back to the night he had stood before the soldiers. The fear he had felt when he tripped in the field, the way the soldiers had looked at him with suspicion. But he had reached out. He had taken a step toward them without thinking, without understanding the weight of what he was doing. I didn't mean for any of this," Ren said quietly, his voice echoing through the room. "I just thought, you might be hungry." The council murmured, the sound like a distant wave. The leader's expression softened just the slightest bit, though his eyes remained as piercing as ever. "You have done more than offer sustenance," the leader said, his voice filled with something Ren hadn't expected, respect. "You have reminded us of what it means to be honorable. Our warriors are trained for battle, but even in battle there is a code. A code that is often forgotten in the rush for power. Your people have something we have lost." Ren didn't know what to say to that. It was hard enough to understand his own actions, let alone the profound impact they had on an entire alien species. The leader turned to the others, speaking briefly in a language Ren couldn't understand. The murmurs in the room grew louder, the air thick with conversation. Ren stood still, watching them, waiting. Finally, the leader returned his gaze to Ren, his posture stiffening with an almost ceremonial gravitas. "We have decided to honor you in the way of our people," the leader declared. "Your gesture will be commemorated. But there is more. We offer you the opportunity to join us, to see our world, to learn our ways. We ask you to accompany us, to travel with us to the Kethari homeworld. The invitation is not a mere token, but an acknowledgement of your bravery and an opportunity for the galaxies to understand one another." Ren felt his heart leap. They wanted him to join them. His mind raced. The idea of traveling to a Kethari world, of seeing the stars as they did, of understanding their ways, it was everything he had dreamed of and more. But he also remembered his mother. She had let him go with them this far, but would she want him to leave forever? He glanced back at the soldiers who had brought him here. The same soldier who had taken his food the night before stood behind the leader. There was something in his eyes, a quiet understanding, a silent approval. I don't know," Ren said, his voice quiet but firm. "I don't think I can just leave my world behind." The leader's eyes softened as if understanding. "You need not make your decision now, child. Our invitation will stand always." He raised his hand, signaling to the others. "We will give you time, but know this, what you have done has resonated across our fleets. It is something we do not take lightly." Ren's breath caught in his throat. The idea of leaving Earth, the only world he had ever known, was overwhelming. But the Kethari weren't just offering him a trip to their world. They were offering him a chance to bridge a divide that had existed for millennia. Before Ren could respond, the soldier who had accepted his food stepped forward again, his voice low and steady. "You are not alone in this," he said. "The journey will be difficult, yes. But you will not be the only one to walk this path. There are many who seek to understand, to find a way to coexist. Your action has given them hope, just as it has given us." Ren's thoughts swirled. His world, his quiet, humble life, seemed so distant now. The stars, once unreachable, were now calling to him. And yet, he couldn't help but think of his mother. Would she ever understand? The leader's voice broke through his thoughts. "For now we will honor your choice. You may stay or you may accompany us. But know this, young one, your path has already been set into motion. The future of many worlds now depends on the courage of one small human child." Ren's heart raced as he looked around the council chamber. The Kethari warriors, the cold and unyielding faces of those who had come to observe him, all waited. And deep inside, Ren knew his choice would echo through the galaxy. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what was before him, and made his decision. "I'll go," he said, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. "I'll go with you. I want to learn. I want to help." The council leader nodded, his expression unreadable but tinged with something close to approval. "Then it is settled. We will take you to the Kethari homeworld. There you will see the future of your people and ours intertwined." Ren felt the ground beneath him shift as the chamber doors opened and the Kethari warriors moved to escort him. The stars outside seemed closer now, and the vastness of space stretched before him, full of promise, full of uncertainty. And as Ren stepped into the unknown, one thought echoed in his mind. This was only the beginning. The evening was quiet when Ren made his way back to the farmhouse, the bag of food still clutched tightly in his hand. He had never expected it to lead to anything like this. He had only been trying to help, feeding hungry soldiers on a night when the skies were streaked with strange, flickering lights. But the events had unfolded so quickly. Now the farmhouse was surrounded by Kethari ships, and Ren's heart raced as he wondered what would happen next. He had never imagined that his small, humble offering of food, bread, dried meat, and fruit, would spark something so momentous. The Kethari soldiers, those towering figures in their reflective black armor, stood in a formation around the house. 2 days ago, they had appeared as shadows in the dark, a terrifying presence. Now they were just standing there, waiting. Ren and his mother stood on the porch, the chill of the morning air biting at their skin, watching as the ships above hovered like silent giants, casting shadows that stretched across the entire valley. Ren's mother Mari had not yet said much. Her face was pale, her brow furrowed with worry. When she grabbed Ren's arm earlier, her fingers were tight, her anxiety palpable. Ren didn't blame her. He could hardly believe it himself. How had something as simple as a meal, just a gesture of kindness, really led to this? A loud hum vibrated the ground, and Ren turned to see a smaller craft descending from the fleet above. The air shimmered as it landed gently near the house, dust swirling in the wake of the landing. The hatch opened and Ren's eyes widened as he recognized the soldier stepping down. It was the same soldier from the night he had offered them food, the one who had looked down at him with curiosity, the one who had taken the bread, the dried meat, and the fruit with an unexpected reverence. Shultar, the leader of the group, approached them slowly, flanked by 2 other soldiers. His towering form loomed above them, but now there was no hostility in his posture, only something akin to respect. Mari stepped forward, her protective instincts kicking in as she looked up at the alien soldier. "What do you want with my son?" she demanded, her voice firm despite the fear she was trying to suppress. Shultar's voice was deep and measured, the accent harsh and guttural, but Ren could understand every word. "We come to repay a debt," he said simply. Ren's brow furrowed. A debt? He had only given them food. What could that mean? His eyes met Shultar's, trying to make sense of the situation. "You gave us food," Shultar continued, his gaze steady. "In our culture, such an act is not without meaning. To offer sustenance to a stranger, to an enemy, is a rare and sacred gesture. It is one that demands recognition." Ren's pulse quickened. He had no idea what this meant, but the way Shultar said it made him feel like something much larger than his simple meal was unfolding. "What are you talking about?" Ren asked, his voice small but determined. "I just thought you might be hungry." The alien leader nodded slightly, almost as if considering Ren's words. "A simple act, yet it is one that has stirred something much larger. In our society, acts of kindness are rare, especially among soldiers. Our lives are defined by conflict, by war, by survival. And to be offered food, by one so young, so far from our home, that is significant. It is a gesture that will not go unnoticed." Mari's face softened slightly, though the worry was still etched across her features. You came all the way here for a meal?" Shultar paused, his dark eyes never leaving her. "Not just for the meal but for what it signifies. We Kethari do not know such acts of compassion well. To offer something without expectation, such acts are rare in our world. You've shown us that it is possible. And so, we come to repay you." Mari shook her head as if the idea were too strange to grasp. "This is madness," she whispered, looking up at the ships hovering above them. The soldier standing next to Shultar spoke up then, his voice more youthful. "It is not madness, it is honor," he said with a hint of enthusiasm. "Our leaders are intrigued by this human child. The galaxy is a place of war, of bloodshed. To show kindness in such a way, especially in the midst of conflict, is unheard of. Perhaps this human child could be the bridge we need to change the way we see others. Perhaps we can learn from him. Ren's heart pounded as the weight of the words sank in. This was bigger than he had ever imagined. He had simply acted from instinct. But here, on this alien world, his simple dinner had become a symbol, something that could alter the course of history. Shultar turned to Ren, his face inscrutable. "Your gesture has sparked something within us," he said softly. "In our world, such actions are recorded. Memorialized. You will not be forgotten." Ren had never thought of himself as a hero, let alone someone whose actions could change the galaxy. But here he was, standing before an entire fleet of alien soldiers, all of whom were now looking to him as the key to something greater. "I didn't do it for anything in return," Ren said, his voice steady now, though he was still processing everything. "I just wanted to help. I thought you might be hungry." Shultar's eyes softened for the briefest moment. "And that is why we honor you. You are rare, human child." The younger soldier, still eager, stepped forward again. Perhaps you could join us on our world, Ren. Learn our ways. See the history of the Kethari. You could walk with us as an honored guest." Mari's hand shot out, pulling Ren closer. "No," she said firmly, shaking her head. "He is my son, and he is not going anywhere." Shultar's expression didn't change, but Ren could feel the weight of his words. "We will respect your wishes. For now." Ren looked up at the Kethari ships above him, their gleaming black surfaces reflecting the light of the twin suns. The thought of leaving Earth, even for a short time, felt overwhelming. But something deep inside him stirred, a yearning for something greater, for understanding, for connection. But in the end, Ren knew that this moment wasn't about him. It was about the galaxy, a galaxy that had witnessed an act of kindness, one simple meal shared between strangers, and had been changed forever by it.